Back then I had the same exact intense conviction about the need for the new ways of solving problems, of living on this planet. And I could see that we were, and we still are, stuck in what seems to be incredibly unimaginative patterns of treating each other and treating the world around us and making collective decisions on behalf of others. Incredible lack of imagination. But there's a huge difference between my approach then and my approach now. The main difference is simply my focus. So my focus for the last 20 years was primarily external. It was using my brain, primarily my left, but obviously we use all of our brain, but in terms of that linear, concrete, sequential side of us, my talents of persuasion, communications, and everything I've cultivated thus far to make change in the world, including other adults' opinions about the means and ends to change. How did that go, I asked myself. Well, with an arts core, we did some amazing things because the changes we observed in young people were enormous. But looking out at the world and the behavior and the decisions of a significant portion of the culture and the body politic, I would say not so well. In fact, it feels like we've returned to a rather primitive state of being. Well, where did that lead me? My focus today is primarily on the internals, my own and those of other adults. Those of us in the position right now to affect change, system-wide. Because here's my theory based on 2 decades of watching cause and effect in my personal and professional life. I believe we've come to the end of the road of what we can effectively manipulate in our external reality, absent real change and transformation in here. That inner change I'm talking about relates specifically to examining our most embedded assumptions and ideas about ourselves, challenging them, extracting them, and imagining something new. I think most of us are conscious of this already. It's why everyone seems to be using words like sea change, paradigm shift. The truth is that sea changes don't happen without a major shift in consciousness. And that happens at the individual level. Changing our internal operating system can be like ripping off layers of skin and requires enormous courage. Remember the scene in Darth Vader, when Luke and Yoda are working together on the Jedi Knight training and he sends Luke into the cave to battle his enemy, and his enemy is Darth Vader, and they battle and Luke cuts the head off of Darth Vader and the head rolls off and he lifts up the mask, and it's Luke. It's himself. This is the deepest and most courageous work we do, battling the demons inside us. It's the hardest thing to slay. It's much easier to project evil and demons outside of us, which is what we're all doing most of the time. Witness the size of our prison system. Look at our military expenditures. Look at Osama bin Laden. And anyone who can look in the mirror today with a straight face and say the world is safer because he's gone, I would say most gracefully, is delusional. What happens when we focus on the externals? Amazing things. The human journey for the last several millennia has been a fantastic odyssey into the most powerful realms of invention, innovation, and the creation of things. Technology, policy, infrastructure, systems. Our creative capacities have achieved a level of civilization that is extraordinary. And also, we know, devastating and horrific. Look at nuclear power and the atomic bomb. That's a creation that comes from creativity. But ironically, for all the mind-blowing new developments brought about by invention and cutting-edge science, our ways of behaving and relating to each other are really stuck in the dark ages. Look at the level of public discourse today, the ad hominem, the amount of investment we make in war-making and defense, environmental devastation. It's appalling, and it makes us Earthlings look like a galactic backwater. One of the reasons we're so stuck relates to this shadow of ours, the parts of us we deny in ourselves but we project on others. This creates a mess. Interestingly, not only is this primitive behavior in terms of evolution, but it doesn't reflect current science. We were talking about science a lot today, right? So I just want to give you 3 really interesting findings from science that should change our cultural norms, that really should, if we were more aware of them. First, there's some really interesting information about our consciousness and the universe more broadly. So when we're standing around looking out in the world, we're taking in 40 million bits of data in our sensory experience, 40 million bits. We can only consciously process 40. That means that the rest of that information is going into our unconscious. It's interesting because there's a parallel finding around our universe. Essentially, we can only see the light part is 4%, and the rest, scientists are saying, is dark matter, 96%. We are flooded with information. We can only process a little bit. So what are the implications of this finding? And this is where it gets interesting. First, it reveals something about the power of authentic collaboration. Because when it's done well, true collaboration expands consciousness dramatically because we're integrating the slices, all of those 40 bits of all the people in the room. And we're integrating them and their unconscious so we can see more. It also reveals something about this power of our unconscious. When we're not in the present moment, when we're not in the flow, our unconscious is running the show. And that's a lot of information to be running basically at the helm. This gives me great humility. It also is a huge motivator for me to want to reveal more of what is in the unconscious and to do something useful with it. And this is what creative practice is about. You've all heard about where creativity comes from. It comes from that dark matter. When we are accessing our creativity, we're digging around in those dark spaces and bringing forward new information and new insights. All the inventors in history have discovered their new inventions came from dreams. They woke up and they said, I just had this amazing dream. And it was the thing that told them what that new invention was going to be. It came from their unconscious. And lastly, what are the implications? It reveals something about the power of admitting we don't know. I was pretty opinionated in the old days. I still am. I had a good brain and I held on to and processed a lot of information and thought I could prove things, that I could be right. But that has kept me from some pretty important work. And the work of late has consisted of not always being right, but really asking more and more questions and being very curious about people very different from me, including the very conservative Republican ED of the organization I now chair, the board of. We couldn't be more opposite, and doing workshops inside women's prisons. So I'm up against huge difference, which is really important in terms of understanding the world around me. The next piece of science, I really think this is key, is the piece about the right and the left brain. There's a great book that recently came out called The Master and His Emissary. It's about the right and the left lobes. And essentially it's a tome. It's for people willing to do a deep dive. But here's the deal. The right lobe of the brain is the only lobe that can see anything new. The left brain cannot see anything new. So, it's huge. The left brain is doing all this concrete sequential work. The right brain sees the new stuff. And yet we give so much prominence to the left as the part of ourselves that solves problems. If the right lobe is the only lobe that can see the new, why, in a time of extreme challenge and global catastrophe, wouldn't we invest everything we had in cultivating the power of the right brain to work more effectively with the left to envision change? We don't do this. We keep operating from a dominantly linear paradigm and we deny the value of working with the right brain. We think of the right brain as being the domain of flaky people. It's the domain of the new, and it's the only way to get to innovation. The last finding is from quantum physics. It tells us some amazing stuff about reality. It says that there really isn't any out there. We create reality as individuals and as a collective from our current consciousness. If it's messy and compartmentalized inside of us, that's what shows up outside of us. So if you want to see change out here, you change what's in here. We're carrying around some huge assumptions that I think are individual and also global, that I think we need to take a look at in terms of the change we want to see outside of us. Let me give you 4 examples of 4 assumptions that absolutely have to change because of what it's doing. 1, success equals scale. Here's what that leads to. When we play by that rule, it's unsustainable exploitation of human and natural resources, global climate change, planetary collapse, war. Maybe some in that reverse order. Assumption number 2, a rule that we play by, or we allow the world to play by. Punishment stops violence. What happens when we play this by this rule? Exponential growth in prisons and military expenditures, more violence, more fear, more death, war. Number 3, rule that we are allowing ourselves to play by. Productive creative work only happens when separate from play. What does that result in? Work and schooling environments dominated by external motivation and rewards. high rates of stress-related disease and disorders, and an emphasis on competition and winning.